Well, back in September, Penn State and Adidas announced a 10-year apparel deal reportedly worth $300 million, and that would replace the school's existing and decades-long relationship with Nike that they've had since 1993. However, Front Office Sports has learned that some members of Penn State's Board of Trustees are outraged by this process behind the decision. They say they're also outraged by the $500,000 product allotment for their Athletic Director Pat Kraft. So let's bring in Front Office Sports Editor-in-Chief Dan Roberts and News Editor Dennis Young, both of which who broke this scoop that you can read on frontofficesports.com. So Dan, let's start sort of at the beginning here, how you were sort of able to sort of get this story moving and where you sort of saw where some holes in this were coming from.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think, we're lucky enough that when people feel they have a story to tell, they come to us, and people are upset and they want it out there, and then you have to make sure that you talk to all parties involved and figure out what their response is. I mean, I think what's interesting here, and we've got the school's view and Adidas's view fully represented in the story, but no one really denies that these things that we reported are in the contract. Yeah. Although what's really at the heart of the issue too is that some trustees still haven't seen the full contracts and have demanded to see them.
So let's talk about what's in the contract.
Yeah, well, first of all, this $500,000 product allotment, annual, starting in 2027, and the language says for the athletic director. And that's separate, or at least in addition to the product allotment, very standard for the use of the full athletic department. That is something like $8 million a year. And again, the school doesn't deny that that's how it's worded. What the school says via very recently joined Deputy A.D. Beasley is that even though it says that, it's not just for Pat Kraft. Of course it's not. It's for him to distribute around the department, which I'm certainly willing to believe. I mean, you need to give free product to recruits and do all that. Everything's crazy now with NIL and recruitment in the portal. But why carve it out then? And we spoke to multiple people, including current and former ADs, who just say they've never seen such a thing.
So Dennis, I mean, obviously you can add to anything Dan sort of said here, but I guess the other question is are the Board of Trustees, are they allowed to see all this information? Because I know Pennsylvania has some sort of interesting laws when it comes to what they can allow, what they can sort of allow people to see when it comes to contracts and deals and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, Baker, we saw this play out recently. I think you guys earlier in the show talked about James Franklin and his buyout. Again, at nearly every major public university in the country, the football coach's contract is, to a certain extent, at least a term sheet or memorandum of understanding.
Right.
And hopefully more than that, is a matter of public record. In this case, the terms of his buyout were not totally known. The athletic director is declining to answer questions about it at a press conference. And we had to obtain from a source this language that had not been previously reported about mitigation and offsets. And again, none of that is necessarily nefarious or scandalous, but
then why conceal it?
It is unusual that it is not a public, just for example, I could go to the University of North Carolina's website on your iPad right now and give you 40 pages of Bill Belichick's contract. It would take me about 5 seconds. I wouldn't have to ask them for it. It's there on their website. And that is maybe on the high end of transparency in college sports, but
then Penn State's on the other side.
Penn State is below the low end, right? I mean, this is a massive, one of the biggest universities in the country. It is the flagship university of the state of Pennsylvania, but because of this state-related designation, there's so much hidden information about Penn State athletics.
And we quote that recently booted trustee, Barry Fenchak, who's done this a couple times. And the retort that others can make on Twitter or wherever they want to make it is like, oh, well, anyone who's talking to the press is a squeaky wheel who's disgruntled or whatever. But I think many people, the reason they go to the press is they want this stuff out there. It's, in the state there's the Sunshine Law, which of course is not the Sunshine Act, which is not the exact one that people are citing. But the point is, they want this stuff out there in the light, and they want it to be transparent. And Fenchak is quoted in our story as saying, like, this is kind of how Penn State operates. This is their MO, is that everything is in secrecy.
Well, I want to go to the competing deals, because again, as I mentioned, they've had an existing relationship with Nike since 1993. We're talking the early, Joe Paterno days, all of this stuff. So here's what we know about the competing deals. Apparently Nike's offered included more than $30 million in cash up front, and that the Adidas contract includes, starting in 2027, an annual product allotment, as we mentioned, for $500,000 for a retail value for Athletic Director Pat Kraft, separate from the $8 million annual product allotment earmarked for the athletic department.
Which you add those up, and it's mostly product.
Right, exactly. So why, at the end of the day, did Penn State decide that they wanted to go with Adidas over an existing relationship that they had with Nike that they've had for a very long period of time?
Indeed, that's the question at the heart of the issue. And what we've heard heard from others is there's kind of a narrative among the school that the Nike relationship had gone sour, and that the school didn't feel like it was getting the love and attention from Nike that some other Big Ten schools
Yeah,
get.
there was a report in local Pennsylvania media about they wanted to do a gold swoosh for the college football playoff, and Ohio State got one, and they didn't. That type of thing has been
Yeah,
reported.
surprise pointing to other schools,
Yeah.
and you love them more. Oregon, which of course Oregon
Bill
is the
Nye,
Nike school,
obviously. But I think it gets to the assumption of a relationship that Patrick Kraft, the athletic director, might have had with people at Adidas, specifically a marketing executive named Chris McGuire, who helped negotiate the deal. Now, Penn State...
And they don't seem to deny that these guys are friends.
And I do want to read, just really quickly, Penn State's response to this, which, by the way, they have posted on their website. It says, any suggestion about personal benefits for intercollegiate athletics executives is patently false. Pat Kraft and his team maintain close working relationships with executives at all major suppliers. That's their job, and any suggestion to the contrary is reprehensible.
Yeah, I mean, I think the history of college sports apparel deals is the history of close personal friendships, leveraging this personal relationships. I mean, the shoe industry and its relationship with college sports.
That's where it all started.
Mostly been subterranean for decades, right? And there was a FBI investigation about this, right? And so I don't know if it's particularly unusual that an athletic director, an administrator, and a high-level shoe executive may leverage their partnership to something else. I don't think there's been really an on-the-record suggestion of anything else, which I thought made it noteworthy that before our story, Penn State published basically self-outed, I don't want to say allegations, but Penn State got ahead of the story in a way that I found remarkable.
By posting this statement on their website.
The first public suggestion of anything reprehensible came from Penn State, which I found noteworthy, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, they decided, okay, there's going to be a thing here. There was something here going on already, and we were asking questions that clearly either they anticipated or questions that others were asking. I don't know if others were asking the same questions, but I sent that statement over email, and then I discovered minutes later it was posted online. We hadn't published any story.
And there's nothing in our reporting or even in others' public accounts to suggest any impropriety. The impropriety is being suggested by Penn State. And that's the only way I can put it. I mean, there's not... Well, and just to piggyback off of the history of these deals, I mean, I think something at play here, and this is totally pretty fair and objective to say, is like things that were done in the dark years ago are now just being done out in the light because we're paying the players and we're sharing revenue directly from the schools and NIL money and cash, and increasingly these deals don't even try to pretend that, well, you need to do an ad for the local gas station. It's just a bundle of cash. And so take that allotment line, right? They don't deny it's in there, but they say even though it says athletic director, that doesn't really mean it's for him personally. That just means it's at his discretion. Fine. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing those lines in other similar apparel deals. Maybe this is just the first one, and this is the start of something new. But to say that it's standard and common, I mean, it just isn't. It isn't. So we might be seeing that some of the things at play here, it's just the beginning of the new era.
What does this sort of say about Penn State with this agreement, the firing of James Franklin, one of the highest contract buyouts in college football history? Is this sort of just the state of college athletics here, or is this a former preseason number 2 team, and all the sort of things it goes through, the trials and tribulations of trying to be competitive in this NIL environment now? Yeah,
and I think we all watched Pat Kraft speak to the media yesterday, and I think that one takeaway I had was that here's one athletic department that, amid rev share and paying players and expensive coach buyouts, and they have this $700 million stadium renovation. Pat Kraft did not go up there yesterday and cry poverty and say, "Oh, well, we're going to have to cut the track team for this." He's like, "Well, we have great resources."
But is this why they're reportedly looking at private equity and private capital to come into the Big Ten?
Yeah, I mean, I think some reporters have raised wisely that using a PE raise to cover operation and payroll doesn't really make sense, and that it's not really.
Also, you're going to need more later.
Well, that's what Cody Campbell.
The minute you start doing that, you're just going to keep needing more. It's like taking VC money.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think a lot of that is still kind of murky. I think the Penn States and Ohio States and Michigans maybe don't need it. I mean, I don't want to speak to I can't talk to what their balance sheet looks like. I mean, but I think Tony Petitti, the commissioner of the Big Ten, said the other day that the Big Ten at least, which has all these really wealthy, it's the richest, it's even richer than the SEC, it's just been more schools and the huge schools, wants to stay, be a high sport conference still. I mean, the SEC is football and basketball and women's basketball, and they sponsor almost every school in the SEC sponsors the bare minimum number of men's sports, not Texas or a few others. But anyway, so this is just to say that like a long roundabout way of saying that like there's money in the banana state. I think many have said that at Penn State there's certainly money running around to pay the buyout, to pay the players, to pay for the stadium.
As we wrap up this conversation, what are sort of the things you still are going to be watching as this story sort of progresses and things to keep an eye on this?
If you have the full terms of the Adidas deal, I'd love for you to send me a PDF of that.
We'd like to get, I'd also like to see the Nike deal. We'd like to get the full contracts from both. So that's interesting. Something that we don't necessarily waste too much time on in the story, but it's unclear whether some people involved are still holding out hope that the deal might get nixed. Again, it's been announced. It sounds like announced pretty quickly. Some people I talked to said they were told, we're close, we're considering, and then that day it was announced. And it was announced with a sizzle reel, that was made about Adidas with Penn State. So behind the scenes, that thing was already done, done and dusted and decided. But it doesn't kick in until July 2026, so if certain people want to push on it, is there time to get the other deal considered in full? Probably not. It sounds like that ship has sailed, but let's monitor that situation. I'd like to get the contracts. And then look, Penn State is just Penn State. In other words, as Dennis said, everyone needs cash right now. And what's the next story? There's going to be another big school in a week or two that takes some kind of big deal. Right now, we're talking about an imminent Big Ten private capital deal. What about school by school? What happens? And non-Big Ten, what happens? If Big Ten does this, who's the conference to immediately follow suit?
Right. Very good points all around. Last thing I'll just note from the statement that Penn State released about this story, they said the process of negotiating securing this deal was handled professionally by the Penn State administration and in keeping with all of our standards. Of course, you can read the full story over at frontofficesports.com. Dennis Young, Dan Roberts, thank you guys so much. And we'll have more for you here with Front Office Sports.
Baker, thank you.